One of the most common questions I receive from students usually comes at the end of a day in class or a unit of the course, after we have just finished discussing some social problem related to social inequality or violence. And the question usually goes something like this: Dr. E, are there any solutions to this problem? And indeed, the question reflects a common desire people have when reading and discussing the scientific findings in sociology. We're really good at identifying and examining the socially structured sources of social problems, but we're often thin on offering specific, actionable policy solutions to those problems. There are a number of reasons for this. One of them is, when using a sociological perspective to examine aspects of social life, it usually directs your attention to social structures as at least part of the source of the problem. Social structures don't change very easily, and any proposed solution that involves some kind of structural change is necessarily complicated. Desmond, however, in his book Poverty by America, does offer a number of specific policy recommendations that could help us address poverty in the United States. And while some of them involve substantial structural change, others are simply calls to get better at what we already do. I want to discuss two examples of the latter, a discussion I hope will persuade you that at least reducing poverty and reducing its severity in the lives of millions of people is very attainable in the U.S. Not only is it attainable, but some things we could do that would reduce poverty would not be disruptive to the lives of the rest of the population at all. In other words, we can do these things. The question that Desmond forces us to grapple with is, why don't we? The first example is not only something we can do, it's something we have done, and done recently. The child tax credit. This is a long-standing tax credit on the books that provides a credit to families for each child they have in the household. The way this works is, when people file their tax returns, they get this tax credit for each child they claim as a dependent on their taxes. Right now, the credit is $2,000 per child. For many households, this increases their tax refund so that they receive hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in direct cash payments through their refunds, sent via direct deposit into their bank accounts by the IRS. That's it. It's just a tax credit, and it's been part of the U.S. tax code in some form since the 1990s. In 2021, as part of the American Rescue Plan, the child tax credit was expanded to $3,000 per child older than 6 and $3,600 per child under the age of 6. It was also made fully refundable, which meant more families could qualify for it. This simple change, increasing the amount of an existing tax credit for families with children, had an immediate positive impact on child poverty. By virtually all accounts, it contributed to reducing child poverty by roughly half, and some estimates put the child poverty rate at just above 5% with this tax credit expansion, along with other forms of aid implemented in response to the COVID pandemic. But the expanded child tax credit was temporary, and it expired in 2022. And since it expired, going down to $2,000 per child, the child poverty rate has increased back to similar levels as before the expansion of the credit, roughly 15% of children living in poverty. We just let it expire. We dramatically reduced the number of children suffering the effects of poverty, and we just let it stop. The second example Desmond discusses is simply reducing the shocking amount of unused aid already available to America's poor through existing policy. We are spectacularly bad as a country at simply making sure the people who need various forms of aid we have already approved and made available, actually receive the aid they're eligible for. Desmond outlines this on pages 89 through 90 in his book. Quote, roughly 7 million people who could receive the Earned Income Tax Credit don't claim it, collectively passing up $17.3 billion annually. Combine that with the amount of money unclaimed each year by people who deny themselves food stamps, $13.4 billion. Government health insurance, $62.2 billion. Unemployment insurance when between jobs, $9.9 billion. And supplemental security income, $38.9 billion. and you're already up to nearly $142 billion in unused aid. End quote. $142 billion in unused aid. To be clear, this is aid through programs that already exist. The law already says that if you meet certain criteria, you are eligible for this support. And there are millions of eligible people who don't receive it. There's all kinds of reasons for this. The eligibility requirements are often unclear and opaque. How to register is a mystery. The red tape of bureaucracy abounds. People often get confused about their eligibility if they have a change in status. And we do a horrible job of anything resembling outreach to make sure that aid gets to those who qualify. In short, we are terrible at simply getting the support we've already approved to the people who have a legal claim to it. Of course, there's much more we could do to reduce poverty, and Desmond discusses many concrete policy options. But there are also things like expanding existing tax credits and reducing unused aid that would make immediate and tangible reductions in poverty. This isn't socialism. It isn't regime change. It isn't revolution. It isn't upheaval or overhaul to existing social structure. It's just an effort to make existing social structures and related resources more effective at reducing poverty, and it's very doable. Billionaires could still be billionaires with expanded child tax credits and reductions in unused aid. But much more importantly, dramatically more people would be spared many of the brutal hardships of poverty. This, too, requires an understanding of the relationship between social structures and human agency. Even when we have social structures in place that equip us to address a social problem, there's no guarantee they will work as intended unless people actively make them operate in effective ways. Desmond challenges us to be what he calls poverty abolitionists. One way we could begin would be to simply get better at what we already do to reduce poverty.